Today's daf is Masechta Baba Kamma, and okay, here Sheldon. Okay, today's daf is Masechta Baba Kamma. Hi Sheldon, we just began, and we are holding daf Mem Vav, Mem Zayin, but we're going to stop from Mem Hey, Mem Vav Amid Beis V'chein Para. So let's just review in the Mishnah. Just going to have it here in the Mishnah. The Mishnah, it says, V'chein para shenoches ashar. If we have a pregnant cow that gored an ox, so now and then you find the offspring on its side, on the side. So it gave birth. And you don't know if part of the goring was the pregnant cow. Was the cow when it was pregnant or not? So and you don't know if prior to it goring it gave birth, so only the cow did the goring, or while it was pregnant, it did the goring, and then it gave birth. So then the Mishnah says something odd. You pay 50% from the para, and you pay a quarter of the nezek from the offspring, which is basically saying that you pay 75% of the damages. Well, we know a Tom always pays 50% of the damages. And really, what's going on over here? You don't know if the offspring was part of doing the damage. So what's going on in the Mishnah that it said that you pay 75% of the damages? Oh, hi, Lewis. We're just beginning. Mem on the base. The chain para shenakasar. Chatzi nezek, reviya nezek. You pay 50% of the damages, plus you pay another 25% of the damage because the offspring was involved in doing the damages. Says the Gemara, Palgan is kehu debaya shalume. In a normal Tom situation, you only have to pay is 50%. You pay 75. That means you pay 100% minus a quarter. What's going on over here? What's the explanation of the Mishnah? So we're going to have two explanations of the Mishnah. Amar Abaye explained like this. Really, what the Mishnah is going to say is that you pay 37.5%. How do you get that? So Amar Abaye says, Chatzi nezek echad. When the Mishnah says that the cow pays 50% of the damages, it doesn't mean it pays 50% of the damage. It doesn't mean that the cow pays 50% of the damage. We are mem vav amad bay by the wide line. You pay, the bias explained, chatzi nezek means echad ma'arboa benezek. The cow pays 25% of the damages. When we say that the offspring pays uravia nezek, it pays 25% of it. It means echad mishmoine benezek, pays 1/8, 12.5%. So basically, you're paying 37.5%. Now, the offspring is, we don't know if it was part of doing the damage or not, because we don't know if the cow, when it did the damage, was it pregnant or it actually gave birth prior to it goring. So the Abaye explained the Mishnah. If the cow and the offspring belong to one person, so let's say the cow and the offspring of that cow belong to one person, and that cow gored an ox. So what's the problem? You always have the owner of the cow has to pay 50% of the damages. Hachinami, the owner of the ox could say to the owner of the cow, no matter what, you're supposed to give me 50%. I mean, you owe me 50%. It doesn't matter if I don't care if your animal gave birth or not, you owe me 50% of my damages. Ella, loitzricha, our Mishnah is discussing the prora dechad, uvla dechad. The cow belonged to one person and the offspring belonged to another, right? He sold the offspring. But we don't know if the offspring was still part of the damages. Now, if the guy went and made a claim against the owner of the cow, he could say, the owner of the ox could say to the owner of the cow, your cow did the damages. Havli ra'aya the islacha shutufe. Prove to me that the offspring was part of the damage. I'm looking at you, the owner of this cow, that your cow gored my ox, and therefore you're supposed to pay 50% of the damage. You claim that it wasn't totally your cow. You claim that it was the offspring, which belongs to somebody else. Prove it to me that offspring was part of doing the damage against my cow. Ella, over here, this situation is the kodem tave lebal vlad chilil. So the person went and made a claim against the owner of the offspring. So he claims that the owner of the offspring, while the cow was pregnant, so he agreed, while the cow was pregnant, he did the damage. So therefore the Amalei, so the owner the owner of the offspring will say to the owner of the cow, to the owner of the ox, Galis adaitech d'shutafe islay. You agree that it wasn't my offspring that did the damage, it was together with the cow. So we're partners in here. So therefore, basically, we're 50-50 partners, right? So the cow is supposed to pay a quarter of the damage. If we know for certain that the offspring was part of the goring, it would also pay 25% of the damage. So it would be 25 and 25. But the fact is that the offspring, we're in doubt whether it did the damage or not. Maybe the cow gave birth prior to it doing the damage. So therefore, the total will be paid out from the offspring will be 12.5%. So you get 25% from the cow and 12.5% from the owner of the offspring. In total, it's 37.5%. And this is only, says, according to this version of Abaya, is only if he approached the owner of the offspring first, so that the owner of the ox says, I agree, there was a partner in this in doing the damage against my ox. But others say, even if he made a claim against the owner of the cow first, the guy, owner of the cow, could say, I'm not paying full 50%. I know, I'm going to tell you, made the yadi, I know for a fact, the shutafi isli. I have a partner in this crime. My cow was pregnant, and you should also make a claim in the lawsuit against the owner of the offspring. So therefore, basically, Abaya's teretz is that the Mishnah sounds like it's saying you're collecting 75% from a pregnant cow that did damage against an ox, but that's not true. What the Mishnah means to say is you pay half of what you think you're supposed to pay, and therefore from the cow you'll get 25%, and from the owner of the offspring, because there are two separate owners over here, you'll get 12.5%. Amar Rava, so Rava didn't like Abaya's difficult teretz in the Gemara, in the Mishnah. Ati echad ma'aba benezek. Does echad mishmayne benezek tani? Does the Mishnah say you get 25% plus 12%, 12.5%? The Mishnah says chatzi nezek, reviya nezek. The Mishnah says you get 50% or 25% from the offspring. What does it mean? Elam Rava has a different interpretation of the Mishnah. Really, the cow was pregnant and it belonged to one person. It gored an ox. Lo'ilam b'paro v'vlad dechad. The cow and the offspring belong to one person. And this is what the Mishnah means to say. Isa lepara, if the cow is still around, that means you could collect from the cow, so that mishtalim chatzi nezek mipara, then get your 50%. The owner of the ox should get his full 50% from the cow, because it's anyway owned by one person. Now we go to Amid Aleph, Mem Zayin, Leisa lepara, but let's say the cow ran away. And I think I said this shot when we learned the Mishnah. So let's say the cow ran away. So then the owner of the ox could collect from the offspring, because as a tam, you pay from the body of the animal, but you don't know if the offspring was involved in doing the damage. So therefore, Mishnah says, if there's no cow over there, then you only collect 25% from the owner, from the offspring, but it's owned by one person. The cow and the offspring are owned by one person. Now, the Gemara just veers off. Why is it that when a cow is pregnant, you say that they both are involved in the damage? The answer is because when a cow is pregnant, the fact is that you look at the embryo that's inside the cow as like the foot of the cow. It's all part of one cow. So that's what he says. It's only because you have this doubt whether the offspring was still inside the cow when it did the damage or not. If you know for a fact that the cow did have an offspring when it did the damage, When it did the damage, then you would be able to collect half the damages from the offspring, because the offspring is considered guilty. Rava Latame, the Rava says like this: the Amar Rava, para shehizika, if a cow did damage, goyim of vlada, you could collect from its offspring, my tama, because gufahi, the offspring is like it's a part of the animal. It's not a separate entity within the animal, but it's part of the animal. Like the expression is uber yerech imoy. We look at the offspring, at the pregnant, the embryo, as if it's the thigh of the animal, but doesn't always work by every type of creature. Tarnagoylis, a hen shezika that did damage, ain't a goiva mebeitzasa. We don't collect at all from the egg. My timer, pirsha ba'almahi. It's just a secretion. An egg is not considered like a part of the hen. It's considered like a secretion. It's just like a separate entity of it, and therefore you wouldn't be able to collect. In case you can't collect from the hen, you wouldn't be able to collect from the egg. Now the Gemara just says something about estimation. V'amar Rava. Rava said like this: when they praise for a mazik, when they appraise the damages, you don't say, okay, let's say in the beginning of the Mishnah, when an ox gored a pregnant cow, right? An ox gored a pregnant cow, just the opposite, right? So when you're making appraisals of how much the owner of the ox is liable, you don't say, okay, he's liable for 50% of the cow and 50% of the offspring, as if there's two separate entities. Because if you do that, the owner of the ox that did the damage, the mazik, will have to pay more. Ella shaman, you make the estimation levlad agave para. You look at the cow, how much a cow is when it is pregnant, and how much it is worth when it's not pregnant. If you're not going to say like this, you're going to be causing the mazik to pay more. So when Bezdin does estimations, they have to do proper appraisals so that the mazik has his fear, it's fair to the mazik, and not that he's going to overpay on something. Another example, the Mishnah Rava says, a man sliced off the hand of his friend, of the hand of the slave of his friend. Now, as odd as that sounds, so you have to pay for their hand. So you estimate the person, how much a slave is worth with a hand, or how much he's worth without a hand. But you don't say, oh, let's estimate how much would a person pay to an owner of a slave that will allow the owner will allow the person to slice the hand off his slave. Such an odd thing, because then you'll end up paying much, much more. So therefore, you have to have a freer appraisal. When you damage a field of your friend, you don't look at the things that you damage. You just look at the entire field and say, how much is this field worth now without this row, and how much would it be worth with this row? But that's it. You don't try to over appraise so that the mazik will pay more. Ravacha said to if it's right to appraise it this way, let's make the mazik weaker. Let him pay more. Why not? The answer is a simple answer. Mishum de Amri lei, because we tell him what happened. His ox damaged a pregnant cow. Parami abarta zikta, a cow that was pregnant, he damaged. Parami abarta shaminalach. That's how you do the appraisal. A cow is pregnant, and that's how much you have to pay. But you don't say, oh, you damaged a cow and you also damaged an offspring, because in that way the mazik will pay more. So we're very fair when it comes to appraisals for the mazik. Another thing, pshita. The Gemara concludes pshita, a simple thing. Para dechad, vlad dechad. Let's say the cow belonged to one person, and the offspring belonged to another person, and an ox, gored a pregnant cow, but the owner of the cow is broken into two parts. The cow belongs to one, and the owner of the offspring belongs to another. So the baby fat Like you're estimating the cow how much baby fat it lost because it got gored, right? And got damaged. So who gets the value of that baby fat? That labala para, that belongs to the owner of the cow, because the cow puts on weight not only because it has an embryo inside, but it has more of an appetite, so it put on fat. That extra fat that it lost because of cord belongs to the owner of the cow. Nifchamai, what about the bulk? The fact is that a cow that's pregnant looks better, it looks bulked up, and it has a better look to it than it's when it's not pregnant. And therefore, there's a certain value to that. What do you do? Do you give that to the owner of the cow, or do you give that, or you split it? So Rav Papa Amar Labalapar belongs to the owner of the cow. Rav Acha Bereider Rav Ika Amar, Rav Acha says, Cholkin, you split it between the owner of the cow and the owner of the offspring. The Hilchas of the Halach is, Cholkin, you split it between the owner of the cow and the owner of the offspring. New Mishnah on the bottom of Memzayin Amarav. A lot of this Mishnah would seem somewhat obvious, but not so. Hakadar, you have a pot maker. Shehichnis kideiroisav lechatzar balabayis loy b'shus. He brought his pots into somebody's courtyard without permission. And what happened? And he put his pots down in somebody's yard. V'shavrta behemter shabalabayis. The owner of the chatzar, of the courtyard, his animal came and like stamped on all his pots and broke them. So of course, potter. He's potter. Why? Why is he potter from paying? Because you have no right. The owner of the pots has no right to bring his pots without permission into somebody else's courtyard. Vim huska behem. And what happens if the owner of the animal, the owner of the chatzar, the owner of the courtyard's animal, slipped on those pots and broke its leg? So Bala Kader is chayev. Then the owner of the pots is obviously has to pay because he brought his pots into somebody's courtyard without permission. Now, if he got permission to bring his pots into that courtyard, and the owner's animal, the owner of the courtyard's animal broke those pots, then the owner of the courtyard is chayiv to pay for those pots. What the Mishnah now leaves out, Mishnah goes on to another example, but the Mishnah leaves out what would happen if he got permission to put his pots into that courtyard and the owner's animal slipped on those pots. It would seem that the Mishnah doesn't mention that. What would be the din in that case? But one could assume that if he had permission, if that happened, then the owner of the pots would not have to pay. We'll see. Now another similar case. Guy brings his fruits into somebody else's courtyard without permission. And the owner of the animal ate up those fruits, potter. He's potter from paying, because who gave you permission to bring fruits into my yard? And what happens if the owners of the courtyard's animal slipped on those fruits and broke its leg? The owner of those fruits is chayiv to pay for that animal. If he had permission to bring those fruits into the courtyard, so then bala chotzer chayiv. If the owner of the chotzer's animal eats up those fruits, then the owner of the chotzer is chayiv to pay for those fruits because he gave him permission. Bring your fruits in. Again, a new case. A guy brings his axe. So he's an Adam Hamazik. He brings a whole ox into somebody else's courtyard without Rishus. We go to Memzayin Amabez. And what happened? Unagachai Shaira Shel Balabayas. Unagachai Shaira Shel Balabayas. And then the owner of the courtyard's ox gored that ox. Or the dog of the owner's courtyard, but bit that ox. So pati is part of paying because you had no right to bring that ox into my courtyard. But what happens? His ox, the one that brought it in without permission, gored the ox of the courtyard's owner. So then chayiv is chayiv to pay full damages because he's like an Adam Amazah, because he brings an ox into somebody else's courtyard without permission. Let's say the ox fell into a pit. again, you had no permission to bring your ox into somebody's courtyard, and you fell into his pit. Behivish meimav, and you destroyed his water. His water is fresh water. Chayv to pay. If he fell into the pit, it fell into a pit in the courtyard, and it turns out the father or son of the owner was in that pit, and he killed the father or the son, then the owner of the ox will have to pay kaifer. The im hichnas birshus, but if he had permission to bring an ox into somebody else's courtyard, he got permission. The owner of the chotzer is chayev to pay if the owner of the chotzer's ox gored that ox. Since you gave it permission to come into your courtyard, you're really basically accepting upon yourself to watch it. And because you accepted upon yourself to watch it, if your animal gores that animal, your animal gores the animal you allowed to come into your property, you have to pay.
Yeah.
Rebbe says like this: it's not enough to say, "Oh, come into my courtyard." It means you have to really firmly say to the guy, "I give you permission to bring your ox into my courtyard, or I firmly give you permission to bring your pots into my courtyard, and I will make sure that it doesn't get damaged." You have to say that. And if you don't say that, then anything that happens just by giving permission, that's not enough. Anything that happens to that ox or those pots, you wouldn't be liable for it. So that Rebbe really requires more of an agreement, more of an expressed agreement between them. So the Mishnah started off like this: your guy brings his pots into somebody else's courtyard without permission. So the Mishnah the Gemara wants to figure out who's the author of the brisa. Time of the shloi bershus, bershus chayev loy mechayev bal kadeis beniski behemte bal chotzer. The whole reason why he's obviously liable if something happened to the animal of the bal hachotzer is because he brought his pots without permission. But if he brought it with permission, it seems that from the Mishnah he wouldn't be liable if the animal of the bal hachotzer slipped on those pots because he had permission to bring those pots in. So basically, the owner, v'loy amrinem, but we don't. Maybe once the guy has permission to bring his pots into somebody else's courtyard, maybe he's accepting upon himself to watch out that the owner of the courtyard's animal doesn't slip on his pots. But we don't say that. We don't say that, automatically he's going to accept to guard the animal of the balachotzer. Why? Because as long as you don't say that out of your mouth, then you didn't accept that responsibility. So money, who's the author of the beginning of our Mishnah? It must be Rebbe, the Omar, who said, Kol b'stama. If you say something anonymously and you didn't express yourself well, loy kabel netirusa. You didn't accept the responsibility of guarding it. Rebbe requires you to express yourself and saying, I'm guarding it. And as long as you didn't say those words, you're not held liable. So that's the beginning of the Mishnah. Eima Sefer, let's say the end of the Mishnah. Im hichnes b'shus balachot zechayev. If you brought it in with permission, and what happens? The owner's animal damaged the pots, the balachotzer is chayev to pay. Well, the balachotzer didn't say that I'm watching your pots. So that part of the Mishnah, asin l'Rabbanan, goes according to Rabbanan, the Amri b'stome, even if you don't express yourself, nami kabuli kabel ani turusa. You're accepting upon yourself to watch somebody else's pots, even though you didn't express it. Who's that author? Is the Rabbanan. And then the Mishnah ends off, V'su, Rabbi Yomer bekulim enichayvechi kabel ola balabayis lishmar. Then the end of the Mishnah, the total end of the Mishnah says, we introduce Rabbi, and Rabbi says that you're not accepting responsibility on anything until you firmly accept it. Reisha v'seifa Rabbi, the beginning of the Mishnah, and the end of the Mishnah, which expressly says Rabbi, is the author of the Mishnah is Rabbi, umitzi asi, but the middle of the Mishnah seems to go according to Rabbanan. So how do you square off a Mishnah? Amar Rab Zera says, Tavra, it's true. We break apart the Mishnah. Misha shanazu, lai shanazu. In fact, the beginning of the Mishnah, it was learned that everybody agreed, like Rebbe, that unless you expressly want to accept something, We don't hold you responsibility. We don't hold you responsible. But then the second part of the Mishnah introduces a new Tana who says, no, what? There is a machlokes between Rabbanan and Rebbe. That Rabbanan say you don't have to expressly say a responsibility, and you're still responsible. And Rebbe says, no, you have to say, I am watching it. So that's how Rab Zera squared off the Mishnah. Rava Amma, and this Rava says Kula Rabbanani. The entire Mishnah goes according to Rabbanan. Over Shmuz, and the reason is like this. So let's examine the beginning of the Mishnah. A man got permission to bring his pots into somebody else's courtyard. But does that mean when you have permission to bring your pots in somebody else's courtyard, does that mean that you're going to watch that the owner of the courtyard's animal is not going to get damaged to it? That's not even entering your mind. You just know that you want to store your pots here, but you're not accepting upon yourself that you're going to guard somebody else's animal. So that's why Shmiras Kederes Kibul Olav Balachotzer. When somebody has permission to bring pots, then the Balachotzer accepted upon himself to watch the pots. Even if the pots are broken by the wind, even though he didn't say so. But the owner of the pots, he's not thinking about watching out for the Balachotzer's animal. Therefore, that's why the Reisha doesn't require anything of the owner of the pots to pay if the owner's animal slips on his pots. New Gemara. Let's just finish off another 2 minutes, then we'll stop. Hichnis peiraisa lechatzar balabayas. Again, a man brought his fruits into the courtyard without permission. He brings his fruits, and what happens? The owner's animal got damaged because of that fruit. The owner of the fruits has to pay because you had no permission to bring your fruits into my field. Rav explained, the only time you have to pay is only because the animal slipped and tripped on those fruits. But if the animal ate the fruits, potter. My tama, let's say the animal overate the fruits, right? The guy had no permission to bring the fruits in, and the animal overate the fruits. The owner of the fruits doesn't have to pay for the animal. My tama, the animal shouldn't have eaten the fruits. Rav Sheshes says, I thought Rav was dreaming when he said that opinion. Because let's look at the following brisa. The Tanya we learned in brisa. A man puts poison in front of somebody else's animal. You don't have to pay. There's no civil challenges. Only min shemaim they're going to punish you. Why? Because who forced the animal to eat the poison? So because it's poison, so the animal shouldn't have eaten the poison. But if it's fruits and the animal overate on the fruits, with the dine adam, when judgment of man, you should also be held liable. According to Rav, you could say the same thing. We could say, why should you be chayav to pay for the fruits or pay for the animal? The owner of the fruits could say, don't eat my fruits. Amre, so the rabbis answered, who hadin afil peres name potter medina and adam. Really, if he would have eaten the fruits, you're potter, you're not liable from dina adam. That it is that with poison, that even though the animal normally shouldn't have eaten the poison, the guy that put the poison there is chayav medina shemaim. And I could say, the case of the is when he put fruits that are poisonous for the animal, and that's what the animal ate, and it's potter bedina adam chay bedina shemaim. Another minute, and then we'll stop. Again, Rav said a case that if you give fruits to an animal and the animal eats up your fruits and gets sick because of that, you don't have to pay, because you could always tell the animal who asked the animal to eat your fruits. But let's see, look at this case. A woman brings her wheat into a courtyard belonging to somebody without permission. The owner's animal. Owner of the courtyard's animal ate up those wheat, potter, then he's potter from paying from the wheat. But if the owner's animal got damaged because of that wheat, the woman is chayav to pay. Why can't the woman tell to the owner that your animal shouldn't have eaten my wheat? Amre, You have this the same problem in the Mishnah, and that we interpret our Mishnah is eating is not part of it, only if it slipped. So therefore, in the Brisa, you could say the same idea that the animal slipped on the wheat. Who asked this question? Why didn't he think of this answer? The Mishnah says the word hain. So now Mishnah you can interpret that the animal got damage by slipping on it. Behain. In the Brisa it doesn't say the word behain. It just maybe it got damaged because it ate it. The idach, the other one will say amalach lo yishana. Will not say. It will say it doesn't matter. One more. Tashema hichneshar lechatzar balabayish loy b'rshus. A man brings his ox into the courtyard of somebody else without permission. V'achal chitin v'hisrus umeis pater. He ate and had diarrhea and died. Pater. Vim hichnas b'rshus. He had permission to bring the ox into the courtyard, and he ate the wheat. The owner of the courtyard is chayiv to pay. Once you give him permission to come into your courtyard, so why should the balachotza chayiv to pay if the ox ate wheat and got sick? You asked me a question when you had no permission from the case where you had permission. Bershus, once the balachotza gives permission for an ox to come into his courtyard, he was accepted upon himself to watch the ox, even if the ox chokes himself. It doesn't matter. So therefore, it doesn't matter. And in that case, even Rav will say that if the ox ate the wheat, and it got sick, you'll be chayiv to pay. But once the ox came in without permission, once you bring the fruits in without permission, then we don't fault you if the animal got sick. Okay, we will stop over here.
Sure, thank you very much.